This is the IPEDS data center, which is maintained by the National Center for Education Statistics, which is a division of the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education. The reason that we're here is to conduct a peer analysis to gather data from IPEDS and the institutions in IPEDS so that we can compare one or more community colleges to each other and make some, at least, estimates of institutional performance by doing that. So if we notice that on the left side here that we have this range of choices that we can make. Today, what we're most interested in is essentially the choices that result in comparing institutions, and that would be the second choice right here. So let's go ahead and make that choice. And we notice that we have our choice, so these broad categories that you see in IPEDS. What data would we like to institutional access? Characteristics, pricing and tuition, admissions, completions, 12-month enrollment, fall enrollment, graduation rates, student financial aid, finance, human resources, and academic libraries. The first choice that we have to make is between what is called the preliminary provisional release data and the final release data. The preliminary data is basically what institutions report and what IPEDS puts up as available data that hasn't been through the full editing process. If you want the most recent data, you go with preliminary provisional. If you're interested in being sure that you're absolutely correct, you'd want to use final release. So I'm going to go down here then and make my first choice in this peer analysis, and that is to say, let's use final release data. And we continue. Now, my comparison institution is the next stop here. And so we have to nominate sort of the linchpin institution. And we're going to do that by adding it. And let's go ahead and get that done. And we'll say we'll add Bergen Community College by name. Now, note that we could have also used what's known as unit ID here. We didn't know the unit ID, but every institution in the IPEDS universe has a unique identifier, a unique ID. So I'm going to go ahead and search for Bergen and tell the machine to do that. And let's see what happens when we do that. It finds it fairly quickly. There's Bergen Community College. Now, I have the choice now between changing this or removing it. I'm happy with it. I want to keep Bergen. And now it's asking me, how would I like to select institutions to compare? I can do that by groups. I can do it by certain variables I'm interested in, and I can do it by uploading a file. The last, uploading the file, usually means that you've been to the site before, you've gone through this process, you've picked your peer institutions, and you don't want to have to do what we're doing right now all over again. That said, we're going to go ahead and select by groups, and there we have three choices: an easy group, an automatic group, and a saved group. The easy group allows you the most sort of precision in selecting who's in and out of the group, so let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to go ahead and select on easy group. And let's see what the choices are that emerge there. The next screen displays Bergen Community College, gives you sort of the overall sort of idea. And now we'll go through the process of deciding who we're going to match up on. And that is, all of these variables that we see down here are things that we can use to slice and dice our peer group with. So we can select First Look Universe, Title IV, participating U.S. only, all institutions. Those are sort of global level sorts of cuts. My experience is most community colleges are always interested in how other community colleges or institutions in their state stack up. So I have clicked on state or other jurisdiction. I'm now going to click on New Jersey. And we notice that what that does is that gives us a universe of 170 institutions. So knowing that, that's probably too many to do a useful peer analysis. So let's go ahead here and say that now we're interested in, let's say, the highest degree offered. Now we're offered in just those institutions like Bergen that has an associate's degree. Because we've named a linchpin institution, notice that it's highlighted the term associate degree. And that gets us down fairly quickly to 24 institutions. And let's say that that's all the cuts that we want to make. I would encourage you to go through and take a look at the other criteria that you might use here. The pretty rich, allowing you to really get finite in your selection of institutions. But right now, we're reasonably happy. We've got 24 associate degree granting institutions within the state of New Jersey, and now we're going to search for those. And when we search for them, we're going to hit the search button. And it's going to take it just a little while, and there are the 24 institutions in New Jersey that we have selected that offer associate degrees. That's not all of them. Of course, they don't all fit on one page, so you have to go to page 2 to get the last group. Now, IPEDS is going to say to you, are you happy with this group? Would you like to select other institutions to include? Do you want to view, modify the group that's in there? I'm going to say, it looks to me like we're reasonably happy with our 24 institutions. So let us just go ahead and we'll tell IPEDS, we're good. We're going to continue here. And when we do continue, the next stop is, well, what kind of variables do you want to use in this peer analysis? IPEDS has the advantage of making things relatively simple in this first category by presenting you a list of the most frequently used and derived variables, in addition to the whole range of variables that you could be using. I would say, let's go ahead and use the frequently used and derived variables. That'll make our lives a little simple for this example. And that's not always a bad thing. So I'm going to click on this. And the pull-down menu comes down with institutions, total cost of attendance, a number of demographic factors, as well as financial aid factors, enrollment factors, degrees, awards, graduation rates, sort of the information that IPEDS has determined from looking at what people are interested in looking at is a very short menu of items with drawn from this much larger sort of menu that you see below here. So we are going to go ahead and pick some of these variables, and you're welcome to pick whichever ones you want. This is just an example for you. And let's say that we're interested in 12-month enrollment. And so we're going to say, okay, we're going to select 2014, 2015, but we're going to notice that that's preliminary release data. That is data that could be subject to modification later as institutions edit or modify what they told IPEDS. Let's say that we're also interested in other items such as student financial aid. That is sort of an old data set. And frankly, it's probably so old that we really wouldn't want to use it. So we are not going to use it. We'll go ahead and choose some other variables within the list. So let's go ahead and close out of that and use the idea that we're going to look elsewhere for our variables. So when we did the enrollment variables, by the way, the other drop down that came down was it wants to know which enrollment, how we want to define enrollment. I think simplest would be just to say 12-month unduplicated enrollment. We could go Degrees and awards. Let's say we want to know the number of students receiving degrees and awards. We want the 2014-2015 preliminary release data. And we want the numbers of students receiving an associate degree. So we'll click on that as well. We'll close out of that. So far we have enrollment and degrees. And now let's say that we're interested, pop down here to institutional character. Let's look at the control and affiliation, institutional control and affiliation in 2516. And let's say that we know that we're looking at public institutions, but let's say that we're interested in what IPEDS has for all those characteristics. So that'll give us our third variable. And our fourth variable, let's go and look at number of full-time instructional staff by academic rank. The earliest year is fall 2014. We have to take step 2 to tell the machine what it is that we're interested in, those on tenure track, not on tenure track, those with annual contracts, and let's just say, make this easy, we're going to say all full-time instructional faculty. We're going to save that. And it says select. Are we interested in just professors, associate professors, no academic rank? In this case, we're interested in all ranks. We'll select, well, let's select all of them. Okay. Now, at this point, we have our 4 variables. We could also, if we weren't sure what we wanted, we could come back here and search for variables if that was trajectory, but we've got our 4. We've picked them from a list, and now it's really time to continue on to the next step, which would be this button, continue. And it comes back with this screen. This screen is interesting. It says we have 23 institutions. We've selected 14 variables. I said 4, but we also have the values underneath the big 4 that we picked. And it gives you another sort of bite at the ring here, the brass ring, and that is, do you want to modify, change any of these? And since this is an exercise, we're not going to do that. We're going to hit continue. And here's your last step, your last IPEDS step. You have your choice here between how IPEDS will display this information to you or whether you can download. I always like the idea of being able to not necessarily view it on the screen, although that does have some attraction, since you can look at your data and say, well, that's good, that isn't what I had in mind. However, you're going to want to manipulate this data, and so my default choice, may not be yours, is to download in a comma-separated format and also to include value labels so you know what it is that you're doing. The choices ahead are institution name and unit ID. There's no harm done in getting a unit ID. And if you choose between the short variable name and the long variable name, my default is always to go with the long variable name. So implementation and status flags that is when IPEDS has to impute a data element and to tell you that it is imputed, that it isn't something that has been, let's say, fully adjudicated, but it's IPED's best guess, then you go ahead and do that. But for our purposes, we're not going to be uber precise. We're simply going to want to say, please give us a downloaded CVS file. So you hit continue here, and what happens when you do that is that you notice that the machine put this in my download folder. The Mac, you do have a download folder. It's different on IBM machine. There it is. This says basically downloads, and I am looking at this download, which is the most recent. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click on that, and it's going to open up a folder. Again, folder --52 for today's date, September 2nd. And there is my data file here. And here are the value labels here in a separate folder. So what I'm going to do simply is I'm going to click on this here. And what that's going to do is that's going to open up Excel, and it's going to open up the file that we're interested in. And there they are. There are the 24 institutions. Now, I'm going to practice a little bit of housekeeping here. One thing I always like to do is to wrap the text so I can read the whole row. I'm going to go down to my second row, and I'm going to tell Excel to please freeze those panes so that when I go up and down, the first row doesn't float with the data below it. Now, I'm sort of interested now in looking at this data just a little bit further, and so I'm going to use some descriptive statistics. I'm going to highlight, before I do that, the college that we're most interested in, our linchpin institution, which was Bergen. And then I'm going to come down and I'm going to say, you know, descriptive statistics are pretty good. And it starts pretty much with a maximum value, then a minimum value, a mode, which is the most frequently occurring value, and a standard deviation, and then the descriptive statistics that most people are interested in when you have interval level data and average. So for each one of these rows, I can come over and insert a function. You'll remember that from our previous work within the class where we worked with functions. And I'm going to say equal max. I got the drawdown menu, parens, and I'm going to go up here and I'm going to select our data range. And notice that the maximum there was 3. And now I'm going to do the same thing for minimum here. I'm going to put equal min, and the drop-down menu comes along. I click on it. It already gives me a beginning and an end paren, so all I have to do is go up and identify that range. And I'm going to do that once again. And the minimum value is 1. And now I'm going to do the same thing with mode right here, MODE. And I'm going to do that by selecting that. It gives me my parens. I'm going to go up and select the range, and the most frequently occurring number is 1. And then I'm going to say standard deviation. I'm going to do the most simple version of that. There are other versions of standard deviation within Excel that make other assumptions, but I just want the simple standard deviation as an expression of the dispersion of the values around the average, which we're going to do next. So I'm going to put equal average, and I'm going to say I have my parens. I'm going to go up here again, and because I didn't use the drop-down menu this time, it's going to return an error on the formula bar. And remember, your formula bar really does tell you what is going on within your work, and you find that up there. And don't forget that you need, when you're done, that closing parentheses, and straightforward with the parens, and I hit my return and I get my average. Now, I'm looking at all this, I'm saying, you know, that's way too many decimal points. I'm going to go up here, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to take those decimal points down to a manageable 2. And with average, I'm going to take it down to 1 decimal point, or the tenths place, or 1.4. And there I have my descriptive statistics for the first column. If I want them for the other columns, I highlight those statistics. I say either Control C or Command C, depending upon your choice of computer. I roll them all the way across. And then I hit Control V or Command V and paste all of them. So what I get and what I get returned then is sort of a useful way of looking at these institutions. We have institutions here on the top, the control, which was a variable that we put in. Basically, these values below are IPED codes, and you remember that other file that we downloaded that would be explained there. Probably the first place that you want to head is the unduplicated head count, and that makes things sort of interesting as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at how all of that shakes out. And the easiest thing that we can do here sometimes for us is to put in a comma, and that helps us read that. We see the maximum is 21,135, which coincidentally happens to be Bergen's 12-month unduplicated head count. Unduplicated head count means that one person only counts once. You don't take the enrollment in the fall term and the spring term and add them together. So 21,000 separate bodies. Standard deviation, our mode wasn't able to be calculated, so we're not going to worry about that. But we're going to say that the average, for instance, of unduplicated enrollment in in New Jersey in 2014-15 was 9,000. But then we're also going to realize that that includes some institutions who were not public community colleges, but were in the group simply because they were able to offer associate degrees. Number of students receiving associate degrees, again, this wasn't able to be calculated here, but we do see that there were 2,435 associate degrees awarded in New Jersey during the year that these data were available. And I'm guessing that that's 2014, 2015 as well. So, all ranks, full-time instructional ranks, the largest is 374, and not coincidentally, that happens to be Bergen as well, which makes sense. The largest number of students, the largest number of instructional staff. And then if you were interested in comparing the numbers of full-time instructional staff by professors, associate professors, assistant professors, instructors, you have all that data as well. Okay, a little long screencast, but this gives you an idea of how a peer analysis can be put together with a limited number of variables that we worked with. Thank you very much.